I think it has terrible ripples. I think that that brings about a fear-based culture. People are scared to work with you. People are scared to speak up. People are scared to be honest with you. And once your people feel silenced, innovation goes out the window, creativity goes out the window because people are just too scared to speak up.
Hey, it's Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm Russel Lolacher, your host, communications leadership expert, couple of decades of experience both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like yourselves. We're all learning here on how we can make the workplace better. This, of course, is the continued new format of the show. Super curious on how you think it's going. This is part 3 of our 4-part conversation with author, podcaster, and reputation management advisor Charlotte Otter. Yesterday, we dug a little deeper into looking at ourselves and what we need to know and invest in for ourselves for better reputation management. Well, today, in part 3, we look at how our understanding of reputation can impact our teams for good and for bad. Because when we think of reputation management, we often think about the one we have within our organization, the whole thing, or with other organizations and stakeholders, or maybe even publicly on social media. But we also have to remember the relationship right in front of us, our team. It's time to learn more about relationship management and how that relationship impacts us. Hold on. I want to pull back a bit because we've been focusing on the individual. I'm curious now to get a little deeper into that team conversation. What kind of reputation should we be targeting to have with our teams versus a larger organization? Because those are two very different things. Is how you're perceived by other work areas and executive versus those you are responsible for and work with every day. Are they two different reputations, or is it kind of the same thing?
I love that you asked that question because I do think that those peer-to-peer relationships across teams are sometimes neglected in the reputation conversation. And what I do see is that, say, an organization is very command and control, very top down. I do see leaders creating their own little cultures. And I think I did that. So I was working in an organization that was quite top down. So I created in my team the sense of psychological safety. But the challenge then for my team was once they stepped outside the doors of our team, they also had to have resilience because they were back in command and control, and this is how you have to act. So I do think leaders have to think about not just this beautiful little world that we're making of our own, but how does that world exist when we open the door and step out into the broader culture of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I've similar experience because you can only control what you can control. And I have no control of the goodness or badness of another leader and how they treat. However, I can be very focused on the growth and the support and to your point, psychological safety of that. So the reputation I have, but here's the thing, how that could impact though, Charlotte, is that I could have the most amazing reputation with my team doing all that, but that reputation might not be great outside that team because they're like, oh, they don't know how to manage a team. They're too soft on them. They're way too easy. Oh, you know what? They really don't, blah, blah, fill in the dot. So it could actually be hurting your reputation within that organization to go down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those leaders have to think a lot about team performance as well, team productivity. And this is where data comes in. I mean, just keep great data because nobody can argue with that. So that was another thing that we did in our team. We might have had wonderful psychological safety, but we were also renowned for being the team with the best data. So if anyone ever came and argued, I'd be like, read the stats, read it, we're performing.
Because stats tell stories as well. The data tells the story of, like, you may not agree with me, but guess what? It works. And I think a lot of HR, I just came from a huge HR conference recently, and it was over and over about your data is the thing that you can use to push back. You can't do the touchy-feelies and say it works. You have to prove that it works before you can start having the conversations to move forward. So I thank you for bringing up data. I think we talk about AI too much. I don't think we talk about data enough.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm kind of curious as well as because change is happening all the time and reputation management kind of has to go hand in hand with that. So for instance, say you're new on a team, you're brand new on a team, or you're stepping into a new role you've never had before, or an unfamiliar team environment. How do you handle change when it's worked so well here, but it might not work so well into a new team that you're now in charge of?
Yeah, I think it's worth having some discussions around change, especially if you're coming in as a new leader. Understand the change relationships or facility within your team. So, what I see often, particularly in very large companies, when leaders come in from smaller organizations into large companies, they start issuing orders. And I think it's really healthy to recognize, particularly in bigger companies, that the relationships and the connective tissue are absolutely critical. So, I think leaders really need to consider spending a lot more time listening. Ask about the change facility, ask about the levels of comfort with change on an individual level, on a team level, on a department level, and really get some sophisticated understanding of where people are with change before you come in and just go, power, we're doing this.
Fair. I've been in situations where I've shut up for 2 weeks and just attended meetings and been really vulnerable and go, I don't know. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen because you're the experts. I'm still learning. But there are circumstances where some leaders are put in situations where they're demanding something right away. And I think that transparency still needs to come to your team going, I'm still learning, but this is the direction we're going to go. We'll figure it out as we go through it.
The transparency
But
is
I think
beautiful.
And I think that helps with reputation, is that transparency going, because I mean, how often do we use the sentence, I'm probably not supposed to tell you this, but ... That helps your reputation. So how do you manage it when there are difficult decisions you have to make? Maybe it's straight out of the gate and it might actually damage the team's perception of you in that moment. You know they're going to not like this. You know it might reflect on you, even though it wasn't your decision, or maybe it was. How do you, in that moment, make sure that you're minimizing damage or at least managing your reputation in those tough times?
I think there's no jumping around or avoiding the thing that has to be done. You can't pretend it's not happening. So do it with empathy, do it with kindness, do it with thoughtfulness, be honest. I think people can smell politics and rumors and change. So there is absolutely no point avoiding it or trying to skirt it. I think being direct but kind is the best way to handle those kinds of situations.
And reputation management is a long game. As much as we're talking about the micro here, but we also have to look at the macro, especially as we look to move up into the organization. So how do we keep consistent as leaders in making sure that we are managing it, that's not going off in different directions so easily, but we're consistent in our efforts?
Yeah, consistency is absolutely crucial. One of the things that I say to leaders is, you might be bored after saying that message twice, but people need to hear it between 7 and 10 times for it to even begin to land. So allow yourself to get bored saying the same thing over and over again. And one of the issues with leaders is that they are A-type personalities and they want to have a new story to tell. So my role always in executive communications was, no, stick with the old story. Don't keep telling new stories. And, observationally, the leaders who kept consistent had the best results in the end. Fair. But it's a tension for leaders. It's a tension between those personalities that want to drive towards something new, but the fact that they've just got to be repetitive in order to get the organization with them.
No, I completely agree. I've only come to the realization lately, and as a comms guy, I've always defaulted to you can't over communicate. But then I started talking to a lot of neurodivergent people, and they're like, if you tell me this thing one more time, do you think I'm stupid? Like, I've heard this 100 times already, because they're so detail oriented so it's a balancing act. To your point, is that we have to repeat these stories, but also understand that our organizations are not homogenous, or our teams are not homogenous. And you may need to cater or craft personal ways of doing that. I mean, there's obviously every communication interaction is different, but yeah, I came to that recently where I'm like, well, there are some people you don't want to over communicate to, because then they take it personally that you think they're stupid, that they're not going to remember.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And, in my podcast, I'm talking a lot to leaders who are neurodivergent, but it's also really good to think about the audiences who are just as diverse as the leaders are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially when it comes to your reputation, because there will be people that will feel like you're talking down to them, or they'll receive the message differently. However, we're one person, so we're communicating in one way that feels most comfortable to us. And that's our conversation with Charlotte Otter on our relationships with our teams when it comes to reputation management and understanding its impact and relevance to those we're responsible for. Tomorrow, well, we're on to part 4 already. We look at the larger organization and its culture, how it can influence reputation, and what we need to do when corporate values or ways of working, when they butt up against our reputation management. It's a whole thing. As I said off the top, I'd really like to hear how you think this format is. We're taking full conversations and splitting them up into particular themes: clarity, relationship with self, relationship with teams, and relationship with culture. We're just trying to be a little more defined, a little more intentional. So if you don't need to listen to all the episodes, you can just focus on the ones that matter most to you. Needless to say, I'm really curious about your thoughts. Love to hear from you. Find me on social media. Email me at hello@russellolacher.com. Many ways of contacting me. LinkedIn. I look forward to talking to you more. All right, take care.